Hey, everybody, welcome back. I'm Susan Lindner, your host of the Innovation Storytellers Show. I'm Susan Lindner, your host of the Innovation Storytellers Show. We have a doubleheader today in that I have invited two friends on to talk about innovation from the consultant's perspective, and not just any consultants, because you can go and consult with whomever you like, but I really try to think about people who bring a very unique perspective to the innovation space when they are working on projects. And some of that comes from the consultant's background, some of it comes from their own philosophy, and sometimes it comes from very unique and creative clients who are attracted to the kind of work they do. And the organization that I want to introduce you to today is one called Profit, and they are the triple header of all three. Let me introduce you to Abram Sirignano and Tony Fross, who co-lead the product experience and innovation practice at the growth and transformation strategy consultancy called Profit, Prophet, like all of the profits that you might follow in your long and illustrious life. Over the past 6 years, Profit has become recognized by both clients and analysts for its standout work in helping clients to innovate new products, services, and experiences, and also for designing and standing up net new organizational capabilities to enable clients to become self-sufficient innovators. That is no small promise that you make to innovation leaders around the country and around the world. You have both very dynamic backgrounds. Tony, you've had 20 years of experience in digital and growth strategies, working with Avon and IBM and DuPont and Chrysler, little startups like those guys. And Abram, you've been working in just incredible organizations like Fjord, incredible design consultancies, right? Accenture Song. I just think the kind of creativity that both of you bring to the table is phenomenal. So let's talk a little bit about how you both got to this place, because it's rare. I think that, well, first of all, no one walks into the front door of innovation, but it's rare that you have folks who are equally involved in theater conservancies as they are in the innovation space. So tell us a little bit about how you got here.
Yeah, I was going to say we're somewhat new to Profit. Profit's been around for almost 30 years. We are, I think, a chapter of evolution for Profit, where as Profit moved from an early focus on brand strategy into brand design, and then branched into marketing and demand generation, and then into experience and organization and culture, there was this natural, I think, rounding into form around how you consistently find uncommon growth. And a part of that is building a consistent way of approaching innovation. And that's where we came into the picture. For me, almost 6 years ago, and for Tony, I think a little bit over 6, yeah?
Yeah.
So entering into this new phase, like what made you decide that this was the path? Like taking this path into innovation as opposed to maybe working in the corporate space, doing the work that you were doing there, but rather taking this broader perspective on helping clients?
Well, for me, innovation found me. I had no intention of being in the innovation space. 25 years ago, I was at a firm called Scient, and two folks who run a lovely little consultancy now called Humanific, Gary Van Patter and Elizabeth Pastor, approached me, and they had been brought on board to build the Innovation Acceleration Lab. And they saw me as a frontline leader who would add some credibility for outsiders coming in. And so they asked me if I'd be interested in joining this organization, and I had no clue what they were up to. But I talked to my boss, and he said, I think it would be great if you joined them. And so I ended up apprenticed. We had Dr. Minbasser, who's now the Professor Emeritus of Innovation, as a Scient Fellow, and I ended up apprenticed to Min for several years, as well as Gary and Elizabeth. And I literally fell into the innovation space. And as you mentioned, we're both theater people originally. I went to undergrad and graduate school as an actor. And so when I fell into the innovation space, I thought, well, I have no idea what this play is about, but I will hit my marks and say my lines and see what happens. And so I learned all of Min's methods and his discipline, and then began to practice first in a very sort of stiff way as I was trying to understand what it was we were really on about, and then increasingly fluidly. So I've been in the innovation space for 25 years, but I didn't mean to be there. And if I look back honestly, I suppose I was there beforehand. I just didn't understand that's what was going on because I fell into digital I built my first website in 1994, and I was at a digital agency called Think New Ideas by early 96. So I was doing work that some people would have considered innovative. I just didn't understand that's what it was until I ended up at Science and got recruited into a team that actually had that word in the title, and I became an innovation strategist. And Abram, I think, probably sprang fully formed out of Athena's head as an innovator.
Yeah, well, some people have a bent for it, right, from jump. So, Abram, what do you think about that diagnosis?
Honestly, I think I kind of fell into the back end of innovation, and it surprised me. The only thing I know I do well is try and produce new things, new experiences, new learnings, new outcomes. I am obsessed with that for myself and for others. And so a lot of what I've done for 25 years is just try and get people to try something different. And that's been the focus for me, whether it was very early on creating web-based software, custom software from scratch in a variety of failed startups, to moving into banking and working on the early versions of online banking in the mid to going into a variety of consultancies and agencies. That the focus has always been on, can we try something new and different that will be a better way, something that offers a better alternative to the existing offers on the market or experiences on the market. And really, that's all culminated in getting asked by more and more clients to spend time not on building new experiences or products or services, but frankly on businesses. Can we find a set of insights that will result in the design and build and launch of a new business?
So that the experiences that you have are really unique. I'm curious how you kind of mush these brilliant ideas together when you're working with clients at Profit. What's the overall philosophical bent at Profit as you see it? Like, how do clients experience you?
Yeah, I'll grab this on a first try. Tony will hit it and do it better. I think everything wants to start with human insights, whether it's a human behavioral insight or at the psychological individual level, or it's more of a sociological or anthropological insight around communities and societies. But we're always starting to look for what might be changing about humans individually and collectively in the world around us, whether that's in culture and society or in commerce and business or in politics. Are there major things that we can attach to that begin to build a new understanding for how the world might work differently in the future? And from there, get to an application or an outcome that could be useful to our clients.
Oh, as an anthropologist, that means a lot, because I don't think a lot of people view their organization as fluid or moving or having specific societal norms, but that's not the case, right? When you look at a company that you're going to start working with, how do you assess what the culture is of that place before you dive in and muck around with the innovation, right? Or start making it shift a little bit? How do you begin to analyze what the tribes are internally inside of an organization, what the holy calves are inside? How do you begin to identify those?
That's such a good question. So at Profit, we think of the organization as a macrocosm of the individual. So you have DNA and a body and a mind and a soul, and so does the organization writ large. So the DNA is what tells us where are we going. That's your vision, your strategy, your values, your employee value proposition, things like DNA that shouldn't change with any frequency. The body is how we organize how to get there. That's operating model, org design, processes, systems, tools, incentives. The mind is your talent, their knowledge, their skills and competencies that enable the body to operate. And the soul are the more ineffable things that create belief in the DNA. So that's your leadership behaviors, your mindsets, your stories, your rituals, your symbols. And we see culture as all of those things. It's an outgrowth of that as a whole. It's a system. And if any one of those is out of whack in some way, shape, or form, they're not in some way consonant, then you get very specific signals. So if the DNA isn't working, what you hear is, we don't understand where we're going. What are we supposed to be doing right now? If the body's out of alignment, you hear things like, it's so hard to get things done around here. If we have a challenge in the mind, we hear, we don't have the talent to do the things that they're saying we should be doing. We don't have those skills. What are we going to do about that? And if the soul is out of alignment, they say, leadership doesn't mean it. They've put up this pretty set of values or this vision or this strategy, but we can see through their behaviors, through the stories that they're telling, that they're not really aligned to that. They don't mean those things. And so when we come in to talk about innovation, the question is, what is well aligned using the human-centered transformation model, and what might need to change? So for instance, organizations say, we should be more innovative, or we should be more transformative, or we should be more something. That's not a tight enough definition for people to understand in what direction we're moving. So sometimes you have to say, let's crystallize, what is it we actually mean by innovation or transformation, or whatever it is that they would like to be different from what they have today. Sometimes an organization will say, we want to be innovative, but we don't actually want to change how we're organized at all. That raises a lot of challenges because, as the old saying goes, every organization is perfectly designed for the results it's already getting. So something there is going to have to give. There's often skills and tools and practices missing in the mind. And frequently, we need to change some of the rituals. We need to change some of the stories, some of the symbols of what we mean by innovation. So all of those things get touched on when we work with clients. But to go back to your original question, I think part of what makes us different is how collaborative we are and how much it's about co-creation with our clients. Because you can't innovate on behalf of your clients and expect that to be sustainable. So you really have to teach them how to do the work, even as you design that future. And I think that's part of what's distinctive if you were to talk to clients who've worked with Profit about what their experience is of us.
Right. Because in so many cases, when you're trying to get folks to innovate, the reason why, as you pointed out, things are broken in one place or another is it doesn't get healed just by creating a new product or creating a new business model or instituting a new set of culture and values that lives next to the elevator.
Exactly right.
Mm-hmm.
You're right.
So can you tell us a little bit about some of the innovations that you've worked on with clients? And we're always interested in the stories that we tell to get the big ideas to their finish line. Share with us a little bit about some of the work you've done.
So I'm happy to take a first crack at this. So I'll take you back to 2020 through 2020, heart of COVID, and everyone's working remotely. And we had an amazing opportunity to stand up a new incubation team for a major financial services company called Thrivent, based in the Midwest.
Mm-hmm.
And it was a process of designing the incubation function and team, getting alignment on that, and then co-staffing that team with our clients, and then building out their permanent hires over a period of 18 months. All while doing the work, because we had immediate work right in front of us, from some immediate things to tackle in terms of customer experience improvements to some more moonshot bets on ideas that they'd had for a while, but hadn't yet been able to pursue, or net new ideas that we invented ourselves inside the team. So real diversity of problem solving. To your point around stories and to where Tony went on kind of the whole landscape of what it takes to orient to change and transformation, I just want to highlight one of the things that the Thrivent team and we really got deep into, which is innovation is very different from other business work, and the storytelling around it is very different. In many ways, one specific way I'd like to highlight is that it's all about being vulnerable and imperfect. Because any innovation story, when it is being told before it has all happened, is a story about belief and conviction in a possibility.
Mm.
There's nothing actually true about it yet.
That's
And
right.
And there's many scenarios where it won't become true. And there's many human choices that will ensure that it does not become true. And so it's a possibility you're trying to protect, and you're trying to evangelize, and you're trying to subscribe all of the right commitments to, because it's the continued commitments that ensure it can be worked on and progressed. And so a whole lot of it was unlearning the behaviors of speaking in certainties or in absolutes or in precise numbers or promising exact dates or saying we have all the evidence or we've proved something, and moving to a more vulnerable and perfect language set around what we believe in, what we think could be true if we worked on it in these ways, and what kinds of commitments we all would have to help it advance.
I think it's fascinating because I often, giving workshops and things like that, I remind leaders that strategy is just a fiction until you start executing on it. It's a beautiful dream. And that's no different from an innovation strategy, right? You might have a couple of products or prototypes, but in theory, it's just a blueprint for the lightsaber, right? I mean, that product, we don't know if it's actually going to be able to kill your father or not, right? We don't actually know if it's going to be able to do what we needed to do. So strategy is a fiction until we start executing on it. But the stories that we tell really matter because they hold the consequences as to whether or not the innovation will be successful. Because if a story, number one, doesn't resonate with the audience, and number two, doesn't travel, doesn't have momentum behind it where other people begin telling it, then sure enough, that innovation strategy and the story will die along with it. I'm curious where story has played a really important role in getting people on board with the big idea. Like building an incubation process is no small task, right? I mean, there are incubators that have stood standalone for a long time, and many corporations have failed. Google just shut down its Google Labs. Walmart just shut down its accelerator program, right? I mean, these are top headlines today. What's the story that you need to tell initially to get people on board with a huge initiative like that?
Tony, go for it.
There isn't an easy answer to that question because the story is going to be different for each culture. There are resident mythologies when you show up. And when I say mythology, I don't mean it's not true. I mean, that's the story people are using to navigate.
Every day.
And every day.
That's
and
right.
There's emotional attachment to it. We were joking before about we have a client who has a mythology around subject matter expertise, and they can't stop talking about, and they abbreviate it as SME, they can't talking about SME, who has it, where is it located, who has more of it, do they have more SME than a competitor and a right to compete based on that? There's a lot of conversation around SME. And you might look at them and say, it's interesting that they think about this so much because they seem to be, as most financial services institutions are, a software firm. I mean, a lot of what they do is encoded in software, but they think of it as what's in their brains. And that affects how they behave. It affects who has power. It affects a lot of things. So when you show up to change a mythology, you have to be careful. Again, it goes back to the human-centered transformation model. You have to make sure that whatever new mythology you're putting in place aligns to the operating model and org design, or do they need to change? Aligns to the talent, or is there change needed there? New skills and competencies need to be built. And then it's heading people in the right direction in terms of where your DNA is setting forth. I mean, mythology is, in essence, it's part of the soul. It's what creates belief in the direction that you're setting. And getting that story right, there's no one size fits all. It's not easy. And it often helps to have a charismatic leader in front of it that often can create belief. A prophet, there you go.
For sure.
Nicely done.
It's
check in
not
the
a joke.
mail.
It's the core of a lot of the methodologies I use in storytelling for sure. It's helpful.
Mm,
I'll give
mm.
you a short example. So we have done some really interesting innovation work with one of the largest door manufacturers in the United States. And this is a company that for almost 100 years has perfected the art of creating that thing you pay no attention to that nevertheless you utterly rely on, a door. And they've gotten really, really good at a low margin, high volume business. And it turns out it's an incredibly hard thing to do well. It's one of the few industrial manufacturing centers that remains stubbornly stuck in the United States. It is very difficult to move that kind of manufacturing expertise offshore. As you might imagine, they look out at the world around them and they see the electrification and digitalization of the home happening. And they're wondering, boy, could the door participate? Which is a great question, because most doors, if you think about it, unless you're talking about industrial doors, are not electrified and they're not digital.
Mm-hmm.
They just swing open and shut if you push them and if you open them by hand. So the narrative, the story we had to go on a long journey towards centered on why do we matter in a world full of Amazons and Googles who have security and connectivity products everywhere. They've got doodads all over your home. They've got data. They have everything. What role might we play? Is there a role for us? Why aren't doors smart? And it was a really interesting question. The even bigger question is there a role for a manufacturer in all of that? Is there any place to play, or are we really just consigned to make the thing at very low margins, ship it out, and then everyone else is going to have all the fun?
And what did you conclude?
We found a spot. It's really interesting. It centered on two things that, again, back to this point around conviction and belief, that they had become to believe for themselves. One is that there were ways that the market was consolidating around security and connectivity that perhaps they could anticipate better and be better positioned for than other much larger, much more connected and embedded players in the ecosystem. Two, that they needed to better value the asset they already had. They were treating it like, oh, it's just the dumb door. All it does is open and close. There's no possibility for us. Instead, they need to think of it as real estate that could be offered in an ecosystem partnership. And I can't give up too much more than that. But it was fascinating to see them come to conviction on opportunities by recentering themselves in the debate and opportunity. And that's what it took, a recentering. We're not the periphery, maybe we're at the center. We just have to think about how.
Right. I mean,
Yeah.
you think about the revolution of like the doorbell to be the Ring doorbell and to be the center of like, oh, I don't know, every newscast, to be the center of like whatever the newest edition of Cops, the show is, right? Of people stealing Amazon packages and dropping glitter bombs on people and, like, and just watching incredible kindness during COVID of people treating their delivery drivers nicer as a result of, I mean, and it's a doorbell, right? We just started from this thing that just used to go ding dong. And now it's the center of so much of our lives that people couldn't fathom before.
Well, just as with personal change, we have limiting beliefs that hold us back. So organizations have limiting beliefs. And Abram gives a great example of recentering themselves in the conversation. And sometimes things that would seem trite in one context end up recentering something important and then engaging people emotionally and making things possible. So I'm thinking as he's telling the story about our door client, about, again, when we were working with Thrivent, we were also full on COVID working with CVS Kidney Care. And it was an amazing opportunity Lisa Rometty, who'd been our client at a big technology company, had changed firms, and we had done work for her in the past around operating model and org design. And so she looked at the way they were trying to create products and services and said, I think that model that I worked with Profit on, which we call DERPA, design, engineering, research, product, or concept management, and analytics and data science, would be really useful to help me rethink how to design products and services here. And then she also said, when we virtually sat down, I think I also have a culture problem here. And so she kept going back and forth about should that be in scope or not. And then she decided it had to be. And so we worked to create some new ways of working for the organization. It was about 75 people at the time. And there was this interesting moment where they had aligned themselves on things like reaching across boundaries to act as one team and embracing ambiguity to accelerate innovation. And they had some great principles there. And there was a woman named LB who was a nurse, a dialysis nurse, and she got really emotional. And she said, where's the patient? We're talking about us. And that seems so obvious. LB couldn't help herself. I mean, there were tears in her eyes. And she said, I don't understand. I've spent my life helping people on dialysis, and we're not talking about patients. And that actually hit me. The last time my father said, I love you, was in a dialysis clinic.
Wow.
And so I suddenly was moved. And we all went, it seems kind of right, but putting the patient at the heart of everything we do, first of all, attaches to CBS's heart logo, but also was really important to all of us. It was a reason that we came to this particular therapeutic area, each one of us in different ways. And then later, a wonderful man who was a partner at Profit and got recruited away by one of our clients, Kappa One, Dhruva Ganesan, was leading experience design principle development. And having set the culture with this patient-centeredness, and then having worked with this team to figure out what were all the services that might improve trying to do dialysis at home or in clinics and what that experience should be, he laid out all the research and he explained it very simply. And a Zoom room of 75 people just started sobbing.
Oh my God.
It was amazing.
Wow.
That's an experience that will never leave me. And it wasn't like he was trying to do that. He was simply saying, here's what putting the patient at the center would be like experientially. And these are the principles that we need to apply. And I think both of those moments were shifts in the whole ecology of the people involved in that endeavor. And if you want to look through it as a lens of storytelling, those were critical moments where we hit on something that engendered belief and changed the soul of the organization and made the DNA more plausible. I see, Abram, this is sparking memories for you too.
It's just amazing. I want to pull it up for your audience to a principle of sorts, because the story is so powerful, but it can be applied in a lot of cases. I would offer two things that are almost impossible to put together, but I think are necessary for innovation work. One is that I don't believe innovation can happen at a distance. You can't intellectualize it. You can't think about it in abstract terms. It must become tangible and personal. The problem first, before you even work to solution spaces, just the problem must become personal and real to you. And I think that always has to be true. It needs to move past the intellect into the feelings. I recognize there are lots of your listeners who are going to hear that and say, I could think of 100 reasons why that's a bad idea. I will double down and say, without that, you can't innovate. There's all kinds of things to watch out for, but without that, you cannot innovate. It must become real in a very personal way. Your own passion has to get involved, and that needs to be about it becoming real. The second thing is, and this is why this is impossible if these fit together, you also have to be prepared for this idea you've become super passionate about to totally and utterly fail and be non-viable in every possible way. So you essentially have to sign up for continuous heartbreak and live with that and be joyful and energized by the opportunity to potentially one day succeed at some of it. And if not, to have created communities of people who nevertheless try.
So powerful what you're saying. I often share that with people is that people don't act on intellect, they act on emotion. Like you can have all the facts and figures in front of you and you can know that your Excel spreadsheet is telling you exactly what to do. You can still face your own inner resistance, your fear, your hesitancy. You can throw up 1,000 excuses for budget, resources, what have you, right? If you don't have the emotion to actually create the thrust behind the idea, it won't go regardless of what your intellect tells you is the rational thing to do. And I'm allergic to all sports categorically, but I was watching an interview with Kobe Bryant and he said, the interviewer asked him, what feels better, winning or losing? And he said, that's not even the right question. He said, because every game involves winning and losing, whether it's a point or whether it's the entire game, whether it's practice or what have you. He said, the essence of the game is winning and losing. So it's not an if-then situation. It's just getting better at practice so you can do better in the game. But the game inherently has a winner and a loser, and there's no avoiding that. So it doesn't matter what side of the coin you are on. You just keep driving to the outcome and knowing that failing is part of the game, period. So stop getting so worked up about it. And I was just like, and I was like, and that's what an innovator looks like, right? An innovator fundamentally sees the board differently than the rest of us and goes, oh, I see a possibility here that I didn't understand before. That was mind blowing for me. And then I was like,
Yeah.
And we're still just dribbling and putting ball in basket. Okay.
Basket.
Yes.
So this has just been a fascinating conversation. And I just want to say thank you both for joining me today. I also will ask you the 3 questions we ask every guest on the Innovation Storytellers Show. What is the greatest innovation of all time? And I'll let you each take a crack at that.
Oh, wow. I don't even know what it would have been, but the first time that a human moved past sort of the standard monkey tools for solving problems to a tool that truly provided exponential leverage. When we evolved enough to realize that if you applied leverage, physics-based leverage in the right way, you could move giant boulders or lift very big things or move very big things. To me, that's just it is the concept we've been pursuing ever since. Exponential leverage out of this.
We'll have to ask some of our anthropologist friends what is an example of exponential leverage that took place back in our Cro-Magnon times.
Love it. Cody?
Yeast.
Yeast?
Yeah.
I don't
love
know
that.
I don't know that we discovered it. I think it was just naturally occurring and someone figured out like that it would do great things to grapes and flour.
Isn't that magic?
It is magic.
How did we figure that out? Who made the first loaf of bread? They probably baked it in volcanically heated earth, as some people still do in Iceland. But that to me is an incredible innovation. And I also have a deep level of carbohydrates and wine.
Who does not?
Well, I've heard of some people who are like that, but I don't speak with them. I also wanted to tell you that I'm in violent agreement with you about the lack of utility in watching sports. The only exception to that for me is figure skating. I would not know if everybody on earth stopped playing sports until I looked up and there were no nationals or no Olympic figure skating, and then I would be bereft. And I will send you a link to Ilya Malinin's
I saw it.
nationals win. See?
It's insane.
It's crazy. Yeah. If you haven't checked it out, check it out. It is the most extraordinary. And the guy's like not even 25. Like
he's 18.
Yeah. It's like ridiculous. Most amazing level of figure skating ever reached. I don't know why more people aren't talking about it. We should be talking about it all the time. Okay. So that's question one. Question two is, we're here to dispel the myth of the great individual innovator. We don't believe on this show that it exists. We believe that innovation takes place in teams. So if you had the opportunity to join any innovation team throughout the course of human history, which team would you join?
So I think for me, just given the personal meaning that it has, probably the Apple team working on the iPhone before it launched, because not for all of, I think, the obvious sort of cultural reasons. I would have wanted to have been there for the moments when they got really focused on the human interaction model decisions they made that instantly set the iPhone at launch apart in ways that everyone recognized and became the instant de facto standard. Every other phone manufacturer, as soon as they could get their hands on one, realized everything that had been done up until then was dead. It just was a matter of how long. You could throw as much rhetoric as you liked, and it has been, by almost every measure you can define, the greatest product of all time. It's a phenomenal thing. And I am sure, and I want to get this across because I think you're totally right about teams. I could not agree with it more. They dealt with a vulnerability and a ton of questions. They had a certain outcome there. They did not know it was going to work.
I think. And what about you, Tony?
I have to confess, I don't have a particularly traditional answer for this. I have had the great good fortune to be in partnership with people professionally a few times. I helped found the organization and culture practice at Profit first with Helen Rosethorn, and that was amazing. And I love being in partnership with Abram, and it's deeply meaningful to me to be in those dyads. I think I am better at everything I do in serving my clients as a result of it. If I were to join another team, this is my non-traditional answer. I would love to work with Britt Marling and Zelda Monglage, who make some of the most creative content, I think, in the world today. They created the OA for Netflix. They just did Murder at the End of the World. And I love the way they think. I love what they conceive. I was at Sundance when they had their breakout year, when they debuted their first film. And I just love how their minds work. And I would love to somehow be in the room with them creating those worlds. I think that would be amazing.
Fantastic. And my last question is, what's something that really annoys you, or something that you wish existed in the world that doesn't yet exist, that you would like to see innovated into it?
A mute button for rude humans.
Oh, I think that's called a taser.
Yeah, I don't think I'm supposed to use those on the subway.
Probably not.
But,
Probably not.
but,
There could be consequences for that.
People are very, very active these days, watching videos in public on their phone, on the plane, on the subway, that sort of thing. If there was just some way that I could mute their device for them, I would like to be able to do that. Give them their own little cone of silence.
I may or may not have shushed somebody at a restaurant last week who was playing a loud music video in the middle of the restaurant. I'm like, Abram, what about you?
So yeah, I'm gonna go sort of off the anthropological and sociological deep end here. And it keys off your question of what annoys me. I'm annoyed by nothing more than how deeply our society damages talented people by putting on them over decades, from their time as children through their career, a whole bunch of expectations that makes them feel like they're failing when in fact they're doing brilliant work. And it can be gender-based, it can be race-based, it could be language-based. There's a ton of ways. It could be anything. But the sheer amount of doubt, self-doubt, lack of belief, lack of confidence, reading a moment as if it was a failure, a personal failure, when in fact they did wonderfully, they did brilliantly. Their narrative was incredibly vulnerable and authentic and real. and they step back and come back and connect me one-on-one and go, I really screwed that up, didn't I? And it's like they're living in this negative thought bubble, this distortion field of thoughts and feelings that have given them all the wrong signal recognition. And nobody perceives them the way they perceive themselves. And yet that self-perception persists, and it's pernicious, and it's deep, and it impedes performance for them and everybody else. We would be so much more brilliant innovators if we didn't, as a society and as people, put these things on each other, and yet we do.
Yes. The ability to embrace our perceived or real failures as just one more piece of learning, right? It's just, or one more colorful story that we get to add to the book of our lives, right? Just one really great bumbling chapter that continues with so much good stuff thereafter. So Abram and Tony, if people want to get in touch with you, if they want to learn more about Profit, what should they do?
Well, the obvious thing is about us individually. I'm pretty online, so you can just Google me and find me on Instagram. You can find me on LinkedIn. You can find me pretty much. I'm wherever you like. I'm probably on a platform. Abram is a little less online, but he is on LinkedIn. And of course, our firm's website is prophet.com.
Fantastic. Thank you both so much for joining me today.
Thank you so much. Appreciate you.
Indeed.